The prairie night had never been kind to Evelyn Carter. It was the sort of night that carried whispers of broken promises, of boots striking dry earth and of hearts that had long since stopped hoping. The moon was a dull silver coin tossed high above the empty plains, its light glancing off the dust that clung to her torn dress as she stumbled through the back alley behind the Silver Spur Saloon. Her breath came in ragged bursts, half sobs, half prayers. Behind her, the laughter of drunken men twisted into something uglier. "You can't run forever, girl," one voice jeered. The sound of spurs followed, metallic, cruel. Evelyn pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself small. Her father's gambling had brought ruin upon them again, but this time the debt collectors weren't interested in money. They wanted payment of another kind. She had begged her father not to play tonight. She had even offered to sell the last of their cattle, but desperation made men foolish and whiskey made them blind. Now the man who had raised her had bartered her name and nearly her freedom at a poker table. Her bare feet burned against the gravel as she fled toward the outskirts of town. Beyond the last flickering lamplight, the prairie stretched wide and black, the stars glittering like cold eyes. She didn't know where she was going. Only that she could not go back. A shout rang out behind her. "There she goes." "Get her!" Terror clawed up her throat as she ran into the night, her breath ragged in her chest, her vision blurred, the world spinning between fear and exhaustion. She stumbled over a rock and fell hard, scraping her palms and knees. For a moment she stayed there, trembling, broken, whispering to herself, "Please, God, don't let them find me." The sound of hooves thundered in the distance, drawing closer. Evelyn scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. She turned toward the darker silhouette of the canyon ridge ahead. If she could reach it, maybe she could hide among the rocks. But as she crested a rise, a shape moved out of the shadows. He sat astride a black stallion, tall and motionless, his figure carved by the moonlight itself. The horse snorted once, as if scenting her fear. Evelyn froze, ready to turn and run, but the man raised a hand. Calm. Unhurried. "You're safe," he said, his voice deep, smooth as low thunder rolling across the desert. She wanted to believe him, but everything in her life had taught her not to. Her eyes darted to the revolver at his hip, to the knife tied to his boot. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Don't hurt me." For a moment he didn't answer. Then he dismounted in one slow, fluid motion. The horse shifted beside him, sensing his steadiness. Moonlight touched his face, a strong jaw, eyes the color of dark amber, long black hair tied loosely at his neck. He wasn't like any man she'd ever seen. Not a settler. "Not a soldier. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Taza," he said simply. "I'm passing through." He stepped closer and Evelyn flinched. But his hand didn't reach for her. It rested gently on the stallion's neck. "Someone's chasing you," he said, his tone more statement than question. "You ran from town," her throat tightened. "They'll hurt me if they find me." He studied her a long moment, then turned his gaze toward the horizon where distant torches flickered. "They won't." Before she could ask what he meant, he extended his hand toward her. His palm was broad, calloused, steady. For the first time that night, she saw something in another person's eyes that wasn't hunger or pity. It was strength and something quieter. "Come," he said. "You'll be safe with me tonight." She hesitated. The voices behind her were growing louder now, closer. She didn't know this man, this stranger with the commanding stillness of a mountain, but every instinct screamed that he was her only chance. So Evelyn took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, firm but gentle, and he lifted her onto the horse. She caught a faint scent of leather, smoke, and the wild. When he swung up behind her, his voice came low. Near her ear, steady and sure. "You're safe now," he repeated. And as the horse galloped into the endless dark, Evelyn dared, for the first time in years, to believe him. That night, as the town lights vanished behind her, she didn't yet know that this man, this Taza Red Hawk, would not only save her life, but choose her forever. The canyon stretched like a dark wound across the prairie, its cliffs rising jagged against the star-strewn sky. Evelyn's pulse hadn't slowed, even as Taza guided the black stallion along a narrow trail, deft and silent, as if the horse knew exactly where to go. Every crunch of gravel beneath the hooves reminded her that danger was not far behind. Her clothes were torn, her feet caked in dust and blood. But the strangest sensation, one that both terrified and intrigued her, was the calm presence of the man behind her. Taza didn't speak much. His silence wasn't cold. It was a careful measure of patience. He seemed to understand that words could frighten her, could betray intentions she wasn't ready to trust. Evelyn, however, couldn't stop talking. Half prayers, half fears spilling out in the night. They'll kill me, she said, her voice breaking. If they catch me. Her words trailed off, swallowed by the canyon wind. They won't, Taza replied simply. His hands rested lightly on the reins, but there was a strength in his posture that radiated protection. Not while I'm with you. Evelyn swallowed hard. The words should have terrified her. Men like him, rich, powerful, feared, rarely offered protection without expecting payment. And yet he wasn't demanding anything. She wanted to look back to see the town lights, to glimpse the torch-bearing men who hunted her. But Taza guided the horse onward with such confidence that the thought of turning around seemed almost absurd. At last, they reached a narrow plateau perched above the canyon floor, hidden by the jagged cliffs and tall desert brush. A fire flickered softly in a small clearing, illuminating a canvas tent that seemed impossibly modest compared to the grandeur she imagined of a man like him. Taza dismounted, gesturing for her to do the same. She hesitated, her bare feet brushing against the cold dirt, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. Here, he said, his voice low and steady. You will be safe tonight. Evelyn looked up at him, her chest tight. I can't stay. They'll find me. Taza studied her with those dark, intense eyes, and for the first time, she noticed the faintest softness beneath their strength. You are not theirs to take, he said. I will not let them. She shook her head, disbelief mingling with the last remnants of fear. Why would you care? He stepped closer, his presence commanding yet not imposing. Because no one has the right to hurt you, he said, and there was no arrogance in his tone. Just certainty. Because you are not a thing to be bargained over. Her knees threatened to buckle beneath her. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not her father. Not the men of the town. Not even the law. Her life had been a series of demands and punishments, but here, in the shadow of this canyon, she felt an unfamiliar, almost unbearable relief. Then Taza lowered his voice. Closer, intimate, almost daring. If you stay with me tonight, no man will ever lay a hand on you again. The words struck her like a thunderclap. Her heart jumped into her throat. Was this an offer? A threat? A promise? She wanted to recoil, to deny, to run. But the fear that had haunted her for weeks, the dread of being returned to those men, pressed her into silence. And yet, there was something in the timbre of his voice, a quiet, undeniable power that urged her to trust him, to follow. I don't know, she whispered, barely audible. Then you trust your instinct, he said simply. Your instinct brought you here. It brought you to me. For tonight, that will be enough. The fire crackled as Taza gestured toward the tent. Evelyn stepped forward, drawn by the promise of safety, the faint glow of warmth and the magnetic pull of the man who had appeared like a shadowed guardian in her darkest hour. She didn't fully understand the bond forming in that moment, the unspoken choice being made. But as she allowed herself to enter the circle of light, she felt for the first time a fragile spark of hope. That night, Evelyn realized two truths she had never believed possible, that safety could be found in the arms of a stranger, and that sometimes, the most terrifying risk was the one that offered the only chance at salvation. And as Taza's eyes met hers across the flickering flames, a silent promise passed between them, a promise that this encounter was more than chance. Tonight the world outside would rage and hunt, but inside the canyon she would be protected, and perhaps, just perhaps, chosen. The night settled over the canyon like a velvet cloak, thick and heavy with the scent of sage and wet earth from a brief evening rain. Inside the small tent, Evelyn Carter sat on the edge of a rough-hewn cot, her knees drawn close to her chest, fingers intertwined as if clinging to her own fragile courage. The fire outside threw dancing shadows across the canvas walls, flickering over her pale, dirt-streaked face. Her heart refused to slow. Every sound, the whisper of wind through the canyon, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, kept her on edge. Taza Redhawk moved silently, almost as if he were a part of the darkness itself. When he knelt to tend the small fire outside, his copper skin gleamed in the light and even the shadows seemed to bend around him. Evelyn's eyes followed every motion, noting the way his hands worked with precision and care. There was no wasted movement, no hint of hurry, only a deliberate, quiet strength. She had trusted him once tonight more than she thought she could ever trust another soul. But now, as the adrenaline faded, doubt crept back. She had never known a man like Taza, rich, powerful, and dangerously beautiful. His presence made her feel exposed, vulnerable in a way she had long avoided. Yet strangely, it also made her feel safe. Confused by these conflicting emotions, she bit her lip, staring at the canvas walls as if they could shield her from the thoughts that swirled too fast to name. Then he entered. Not abruptly, not with force, but with the deliberate quiet of someone who understood the power of presence. He knelt in front of her, close enough that she could feel the faint warmth radiating from him, yet careful to respect the fragile boundary she clung to. His eyes met hers. Dark amber, deep and unreadable, yet strangely soft at the edges. "Evelyn," he said, low and gentle, his voice a melody that seemed to vibrate against her very bones. "Do not be afraid." She shook her head slightly, words failing her. The fear was still there, yes, but it was different now. It wasn't the fear of men who would harm her. It was the fear of feeling something unfamiliar, uncontrollable, and yet undeniable. Taza leaned just a fraction closer, so that his voice brushed against her ear as though the words themselves were a caress. "I will touch you tonight, but not to harm you, only to choose you." Her breath caught. The words were simple, yet they struck deeper than anything she had heard in her 19 years of life. A whisper, gentle and deliberate, carrying both promise and power, a statement of intent so bold it left her stunned. Her body froze, mind spinning with disbelief, yet in that moment every instinct told her to trust him. "Choose me?" she whispered, barely daring to speak. He nodded, eyes never leaving hers. "You have been hunted, terrified, alone. Tonight I offer you something different: protection, choice, respect, and if you allow it, connection." The air between them felt charged, electric with an intimacy that neither rushed nor demanded. His hand hovered near hers, a promise without touch, yet heavier than any weight she had ever carried. Evelyn's heart pounded in a rhythm that echoed in her ears. She had begged not to be hurt for so long, prayed for safety, and now she faced a man who spoke not only of protection but of deliberate devotion. A strange warmth spread through her chest, mingling with relief and a flicker of something dangerously like desire. She realized then that she had never felt seen, truly seen by anyone, until Taza. He reached out slowly, finally brushing his fingertips against her hand. It was featherlight, a contact so delicate it might have been mistaken for air, but it carried intention, certainty, and an unspoken vow. Evelyn trembled, not with fear but with the realization that this moment was no accident. Taza's voice, barely above a whisper, came again. "Tonight, you are mine only in choice. And I choose you, Evelyn, forever if you allow it." The words wrapped around her like the warmth of the fire, fierce and tender at once. And for the first time that night, Evelyn felt a flicker of courage, of hope. She dared a trembling nod, realizing that the night's terror had led her not into captivity, but to the promise of being chosen, truly, irrevocably, and with care. In that flickering firelight, amidst the canyon shadows, a delicate bond was born. One whispered word, one careful touch, and Evelyn's heart, long shuttered against the cruelty of the world, began to open. Morning arrived slowly, spilling pale gold across the canyon cliffs and brushing the tent with soft light. Evelyn awoke to a silence that felt almost sacred. Taza was already awake, standing outside the tent, the morning breeze tugging at his long black hair. The fire he had built the night before smoldered gently, smoke curling into the sky, a quiet guardian of their hidden refuge. She emerged cautiously, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, still wary, still aware of the fragility of safety. Taza watched her with a quiet attentiveness, not with possessiveness, not with expectation, but with something rarer: respect. Evelyn realized that he had not touched her since the whispered promise of last night. Not because he lacked desire, but because he understood that trust could not be demanded. It must be earned. As she stepped closer, the first rays of sunlight highlighted his features in full: high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes like amber flames that carried both fire and shadow. It was not just his physical presence that struck her, but the weight of his history, the invisible lines of experience carved into him by a life lived across two very different worlds. "You're not like anyone I've ever known," she said, her voice soft. The words were more statement than question, almost a recognition of what she felt without fully understanding it. "I am Taza Redhawk," he replied simply, his tone even, steady, but layered with meaning. "Son of a chief, heir to a trading empire, and yet I belong fully to neither world." Evelyn studied him, intrigued despite herself. "A chief's son?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "And your other world?" He motioned broadly to the expanse of canyon, desert, and distant plains. The world of settlers, traders, and men who bow to coin and law rather than honor. "My mother was Spanish, noble. My father Apache and proud. Either fully accepted me, yet both shaped me. I walk between two worlds, but belong entirely to neither, until now." Her mind struggled to grasp this. A man of wealth and influence, yet living by a code she could only begin to imagine. He could have any woman, any power, any comfort, but here he was, choosing to protect her, choosing her. The realization left her breathless, a mixture of fear, wonder, and an unexpected hope. Taza walked toward the horses grazing nearby, his movements deliberate and fluid. He gestured for Evelyn to follow. "You must understand," he said, voice low. "I do not buy a woman. I do not seek to control or command. I choose. I choose only those whose hearts and spirits meet mine. Last night I offered protection. Tonight I offer choice, and I see in you courage." Evelyn felt a flush rise to her cheeks, both from pride and confusion. Courage. She had fled, trembling, terrified, yet in his eyes that fear was transformed into strength, a testament to her survival. She fell silent, letting him speak, letting him guide her through the morning. Taza taught her how to handle the reins properly, how to read the subtle cues of a horse, how to anticipate movement in the wild, skills she never imagined she would need. Every lesson carried a subtle truth: trust, attention, patience. The same qualities he valued in people, the same qualities that had likely made him a man who commanded respect across both of his worlds. Finally, as they paused atop a ridge overlooking the awakening prairie, Evelyn found herself asking the question she had avoided in her heart. "Why me? Why choose me?" Taza's eyes softened, revealing a rare vulnerability beneath the stoic exterior. "Because," he said slowly, "most people see only surface. They see wealth, beauty, or convenience. I see spirit. You have survived, despite fear and cruelty, without losing your heart. That is rare. That is worth choosing." Evelyn's throat tightened. Never before had anyone looked past the world's judgments to see her in full. She realized, with a mixture of awe and trembling hope, that the man who saved her life was not just her protector. He was a mirror of her own strength. A man who lived between two worlds, yet chose to walk beside her and perhaps eventually, with her. In that quiet morning, with the canyon stretching endlessly before them, Evelyn sensed the first stirrings of a truth she could barely name: love. In its most potent form was not about fear or obligation. It was about choice, courage, and the rare gift of being seen. And in Taza's amber gaze she saw the promise of a world where she could finally belong, not just to someone but to herself. The calm of the canyon was deceptive. By mid-morning, a distant echo of hooves rolled across the prairie below, carrying with it a sound that made Evelyn's heart lurch: the relentless approach of men who had once sought to claim her. Her stomach twisted into knots, every instinct screaming danger. Taza, standing beside her, felt the tension instantly, his posture shifting, alert but composed. "They've found you," Evelyn whispered, fear threading her words. I should go back." Taza's hand brushed hers, steadying. "No," he said quietly, but with an iron certainty that brooked no argument. "They will not touch you. Not now. Not ever." Below the ridge, the figures became clearer. 4 men, armed and arrogant, riding hard, shouting her name into the wind. One was a sheriff from the town, a man whose leering eyes had haunted her dreams for weeks. The others were her father's creditors, eager to enforce a debt he had no means to repay. They rode with confidence, certain that a girl, alone, cornered, would fall into their hands. Evelyn's hands trembled as Taza adjusted his stance, subtly signaling her to move closer behind him. She obeyed, watching as his expression hardened, every muscle coiled like a panther ready to spring. "They will try," she said softly. "I can't stop them." "You will not need to," Taza replied. "I will stop them." The first rider spurred his horse up the slope, shouting her name. The sound was filled with a cruel mockery, but Taza raised his hand and spoke a word in a language Evelyn didn't understand. His horse leapt forward with a fluid power that made her gasp, and suddenly he was between her and the approaching men. He was a figure of shadow and fire, radiating authority and danger. The sheriff dismounted, arrogance still painted across his features. "Hand her over, Taza," he barked. "She belongs to us. That's the law." Taza's amber eyes locked on the man. There was no hesitation, no doubt. His voice, low and calm, carried the weight of unspoken threat. "She belongs to no one but herself and to me by her choice. Step closer and you will regret it." Evelyn's pulse raced. She had never seen a man command such fear without raising a weapon, yet every hair on the sheriff's neck seemed to bristle in response. It was as though Taza's very presence reshaped the rules of the world around him. The men hesitated, unsure of the strength standing before them. But Taza didn't wait. With precise movements, he guided Evelyn behind a boulder, keeping her shielded while his rifle glimmered briefly in the sun. It was enough. The creditors exchanged uneasy glances. None dared move forward. The sheriff, red-faced with frustration, spat on the ground and muttered something that Evelyn didn't catch. "Leave," Taza said, voice like a whip crack. "Go back to your town and your debts. You will trouble her no longer." The men mounted silently, tension heavy in the air, and retreated down the ridge. Evelyn exhaled, trembling with relief and awe. She had seen courage. Yes, but she had also seen something deeper. Devotion that demanded no payment, no fear, no coercion. Only a promise kept. When the last hoofbeats faded into the distance, Taza turned to her. His expression softened, the iron resolve giving way to warmth. "You see," he said gently, "I will not only protect you, Evelyn. I will stand between you and a cruel world every time it rises against you." Her eyes filled with tears. For so long she had been hunted, terrified, alone. Now in the presence of this man she felt a strange and powerful sense of belonging. He had risked everything, his safety, his reputation, his life, to ensure she was free. For the first time she understood the weight of his whispered words from the night before. "I'll touch you tonight, and choose you forever." This was the proof, not just in whispers but in action. Evelyn took a trembling step forward and touched his arm. I trust you," she whispered. Taza's eyes softened, and he offered her the faintest smile, a rare glimpse of the man beneath the warrior and protector. "Good," he said simply. "Tonight and every night you will have a choice, and I will always honor it." The canyon returned to silence, but Evelyn's world had shifted. Fear no longer ruled her. She had discovered courage, safety, and a protector whose devotion went far beyond words. The threat had passed, but the bond forged in the night's terror would last a lifetime. The sun rose higher, casting the canyon in a warm glow that belied the tension of the previous night. Evelyn Carter stirred from a restless sleep, still haunted by shadows and the echo of hooves. Yet this morning felt different. The terror of the men who had pursued her was gone, replaced by the steady presence of Taza Redhawk, whose calm strength seemed to anchor her very soul. But even safety required vigilance and trust. Taza had already saddled the horses, his movements precise, deliberate, and filled with a quiet authority that Evelyn had begun to admire. Today he would teach her more than riding. He would teach her to face the world unafraid. "You must learn to anticipate danger, not flee from it," he said as she approached, his voice low and patient. "A warrior does not rely on luck or escape. He relies on skill, attention, and trust. Trust in himself and in those he chooses to protect." Evelyn nodded, a little uncertain. Her hands were still sore from the previous night's flight, and her heart still raced at the thought of the men who had hunted her. I don't know if I can," she admitted, the confession trembling in her voice. "You can," Taza said firmly. "And you will." "Courage is not the absence of fear, Evelyn. It is the mastery of it." He led her to a clearing where the horses grazed, the canyon stretching endlessly behind them. With steady hands, he showed her how to hold the reins, how to feel the horse's movements, and how to anticipate its reactions. Evelyn struggled at first, stumbling as she tried to synchronize with the powerful animal beneath her. But Taza did not scold. He adjusted her posture, guided her hands, and let her try again. Always patient, always encouraging. As the hours passed, Evelyn began to notice the subtle lessons hidden in his instructions. Riding was not just about control. It was about trust. She had to trust the horse, trust her own instincts, and most of all, trust the man who stood beside her. She realized that every movement, every gesture of Taza's was designed to teach her confidence, not dependence. After several tries, she finally managed a smooth ride across the clearing, the wind whipping her hair and dust into a halo around her face. Taza's eyes softened, a rare smile flickering across his features. "You see," he said, "you have the skill, the courage. Now you must trust it." The lesson moved beyond the horses. He took her through basic survival skills, tracking, reading the signs of the wind and earth, and observing the subtle cues of the land. Each step was a test, pushing her just enough to challenge her fears without overwhelming her. At one point, he asked her to climb a narrow ledge above the canyon floor, a spot she initially refused. "I can't," she said, panic creeping in. "It's too high, too dangerous." Taza approached slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I will not let you fall," he said quietly. "But you must let go of your fear. That is the only way to rise." Her heart pounded, but she nodded, trusting him as she had in the canyon the night before. Step by careful step, she moved along the ledge, the world falling away beneath her, until she reached the top. When she turned, Taza's eyes met hers with silent approval. And for the first time, she felt the thrill of conquering fear, not because he had carried her, but because she had chosen to trust him and herself. By sunset, Evelyn was exhausted but transformed. She understood the weight of Taza's philosophy. Trust could be given, but it was earned in action. And she had earned it, through patience, courage, and the willingness to face fear rather than hide from it. As they sat together atop the ridge, the wind cooling their heated skin, Taza finally spoke with quiet pride. "You are stronger than you know, Evelyn, and stronger still when you choose to trust, not just in me but in yourself." She looked at him, her chest swelling with gratitude, awe, and a strange, growing affection. I think I understand," she whispered. "It's not just about protection, it's about choice." Taza's lips curved into the faintest, rarest smile. "Exactly. Choice is everything. And tonight, when darkness comes again, you will know it, not as fear, but as power." For the first time, Evelyn believed it. And for the first time, she felt the fragile stirrings of a bond that was no longer just about survival, but about something far deeper, far more enduring. Trust, courage, and the promise of love. The canyon air carried a crispness that hinted at the coming fall, though the sun still bathed the cliffs in gold. Evelyn Carter moved beside Taza Redhawk, her hands now steady on the reins of her horse. Over the past days, she had learned to ride, to read the land, and to anticipate the subtle cues of both horse and man. But today there was a different lesson, one of the heart. The fire outside the tent that evening crackled gently, shadows flickering across Taza's strong features. Evelyn felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with a strange, exhilarating anticipation. The events of the previous nights, the flight from the town, the whispered promise, the threat vanquished, had left their mark on her. She had survived, yes. She had trusted, yes. And now, as she watched Taza's gaze linger on her, she realized that something deeper was stirring within her. Taza approached, the soft crunch of his boots on the sandy ground barely audible over the fire. He knelt near her, not forcing proximity but creating a space where she could meet his presence on her own terms. His amber eyes were fixed on hers, and Evelyn felt a shiver run through her. She had been touched by fear, by terror, by desperation, but never by a sensation like this, an undeniable pull, a gravity that both frightened and thrilled her. "You have learned much," Taza said quietly, his voice a low rumble that resonated through her chest. "You have faced danger and emerged stronger. You have trusted me, and yourself. That is why tonight—" He paused, the words heavy with intention. "I choose you." Evelyn's breath caught. The memory of his whispered promise from their first night together surged within her. "I will touch you tonight, but only to choose you, not to harm you." Her pulse raced as he reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, deliberate, full of meaning, and it ignited a warmth that spread from her chest outward, a fire she had never known she could feel. I don't know what to say," she whispered, voice trembling, fear and longing mingling in equal measure. Taza smiled faintly, a rare softness breaking through his usually composed demeanor. "Say nothing, only feel. Tonight is not about words. It is about truth. Yours, mine, ours." The firelight danced across his features as he leaned slightly closer, and Evelyn felt the weight of the moment, the gravity of the choice being made. Their hands met, fingers intertwining, a delicate electric contact that spoke louder than any declaration. She felt seen, not for her beauty, her status, or her youth, but for her courage, her resilience, her very spirit. As the night deepened, Taza's presence became a shield and a flame. His hands were careful, reverent, never forcing, never rushing. Every brush of skin, every glance, every whisper of his voice carried a promise that she was safe, that she was chosen, that she was valued beyond measure. The fire outside mirrored the fire within her, a blaze of newfound strength and desire that she could neither deny nor fully understand. Evelyn realized then that love was not just about longing or passion. It was about trust, courage, and recognition. Taza had seen her, truly seen her in a way no one else ever had. And in doing so, he had lit something within her, a flame that would not be easily extinguished. Hours passed in quiet intimacy, the night folding around them, enclosing them in a sanctuary of warmth and trust. Evelyn understood that she had been terrified once, that the world outside the canyon was cruel and relentless. But now, in the firelight, with Taza's steady gaze and careful hands, she had discovered something infinitely more potent, the courage to surrender, to choose and to feel. When the fire had burned low and the stars glimmered overhead, Evelyn rested her head against Taza's shoulder, the heat of his body and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat filling her with a profound sense of safety. She whispered almost to herself, I've never felt anything like this. Taza's amber eyes met hers and a faint smile curved his lips. Then let it stay, he murmured. Let it burn, and know that it is yours as much as it is mine. In that moment, Evelyn Carter understood fully. The fire in her heart was not fear nor desperation. It was the spark of something enduring, fierce, and true. And it had chosen her forever. The return to town was nothing like Evelyn had imagined. The streets that had once seemed familiar now felt foreign, filled with the echo of past fears and judgmental eyes. The sun beat down harshly, reflecting off the wooden storefronts, the heat mingling with the tension in her chest. Every glance from the townsfolk reminded her of the whispers, the pointing fingers and the rumors that had shadowed her life for years. But this time, she was not alone. Taza Redhawk rode beside her on his black stallion, the reins held loosely in his steady hands. He moved with a calm authority that drew immediate attention, his presence commanding respect without a word. The town had heard of him, the rich, powerful Apache whose dealings in horses and trade stretched across the territories. But seeing him here beside a girl who had once been considered vulnerable and powerless silenced even the boldest critics. From the moment they entered the square, the murmurs began. That's her. With him? One woman whispered, clutching her shawl. She's the Apache's plaything. Another muttered, a note of disgust in her tone. Evelyn's heart clenched. Old fears tugged at her, but she refused to give them power. Taza's hand brushed lightly against hers, grounding her, reminding her of the promise made in the canyon. Protection, choice, and honor. She straightened, lifting her chin, and for the first time, she allowed herself to meet the townsfolk's scrutiny without shrinking. The sheriff, red-faced and steaming with anger, stepped forward, attempting to assert control. That girl belongs to me, he barked, pointing a trembling finger. The law... Taza cut him off with a calm yet deadly precision, his amber eyes locking onto the man. She belongs to no one but herself, he said, his voice carrying across the square like thunder wrapped in silk. And by her choice, she is mine. A hush fell over the crowd. The sheriff's face paled, the confidence that had fueled his threats faltering under Taza's unwavering gaze. The townspeople exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to support the lawman or acknowledge the undeniable truth standing before them. This was no ordinary man, and this was no ordinary girl. Evelyn's pulse raced. She had imagined hiding, running, or pleading, but none of those options felt necessary. The power of choice, the courage she had learned in the canyon surged through her veins. She stepped forward, her voice clear and firm, carrying across the square. No, she said. The word was small, but it carried more weight than any shouting or pleading ever could. I am his wife now. I chose him. Not because I am forced, not because of fear, but because I chose to. A collective silence followed. Heads turned. Whispers died mid-sentence, and the sheriff's hand twitched uselessly at his side. Taza did not move, did not intervene. He let her stand, let her speak, and in doing so, he showed her power in its truest form, not dominance, but respect for the choice of another. The townsfolk began to murmur again, but this time the tone had changed. Curiosity, awe, and a reluctant respect replaced judgment and mockery. Even those who had once scoffed now regarded her differently. Evelyn's spine straightened, her chest filling with a newfound pride. The sheriff, realizing his authority had crumbled, spat on the ground and turned away, muttering threats he could no longer carry out. The creditors who had followed in his wake shrank back, intimidated by Taza's calm dominance and the girl who had found her voice. Evelyn looked at Taza, her eyes shining. You stood by me," she whispered, awe and gratitude mingling in her tone. "I always will," he replied softly, his hand brushing hers briefly. "Not because I must, but because I choose to. Every day I choose you." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the town square, Evelyn felt the last remnants of fear dissolve. She had faced the judgment of the town, and through courage and choice she had claimed her place. For the first time she felt seen, not as a victim, not as a girl to be bargained over, but as a woman who had the strength to be both protected and free. In that moment, Evelyn Carter understood that the true power of love was not in surrender, nor in possession, but in the courage to stand and claim it openly. And with Taza beside her, she was ready for whatever the world might dare to throw their way. The town square had quieted, the echoes of judgment fading into uneasy whispers, but the weight of reality pressed upon Evelyn Carter's chest. Freedom, choice, and love had all been claimed in that moment with Taza Redhawk. Yet the world still demanded a reckoning. Her father's debts, unpaid and mounting, still threatened to undo everything they had fought to secure. This was the price of survival, and now perhaps the price of forever. Taza dismounted outside the town's small bank and trading post, his movements deliberate, calm, yet radiating quiet authority. He had spent the night considering the implications of their return, the men who pursued her, the debts that shackled her family, the sneering eyes that would never rest until they saw her diminished. But he did not hesitate. He would pay the price himself, not as charity, but as a statement, a closing of old wounds and a claim on the future. Evelyn followed, heart tight. "You don't have to," she said softly, fear mingled with gratitude. I can live with what we have. It's enough." Taza paused, amber eyes meeting hers. "It is never enough to survive merely by avoiding danger. I do this because it must be done, because I choose to honor you, and because the debts of the past cannot dictate the life we are about to claim together." Word spread quickly that Taza Redhawk had settled the accounts of the Carter family in full. The townspeople watched, some with awe, others with begrudging respect. Men who had scoffed at the girl now looked at her differently. Women whispered that she had not only survived but had been elevated by a man of immense power, not through manipulation or coercion, but by deliberate choice. Evelyn felt a strange mixture of relief and humility. Her father, humbled by the turn of events, approached, bowing his head. "I owe more than I can repay," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "You both have saved more than our lives. You have saved my dignity, my family's honor." Taza's gaze was unwavering, steady. "You are not required to understand nor repay," he said simply. "The past ends here. She is free. You are free. That is enough." Evelyn's hands trembled as she clasped Taza's. The gravity of his actions, the sheer devotion that underpinned them, left her speechless. For so long she had known fear of men, of society, of her own vulnerability. Now she was learning a different truth. Love carried a price. Yes, but the cost was measured in courage, trust, and the willingness to protect what mattered most. That night, under a sky ablaze with stars, they returned to the canyon where their bond had first been forged. The air was cool, the wind carrying scents of sage and wet earth, familiar and sacred. Evelyn realized that freedom was not simply absence of fear, but presence of choice, the ability to walk forward without the chains of past wrongs. Taza built a fire while she tended to the horses. As they sat together, the crackle of flames filling the silence, he reached for her hand. "Tonight the world is quiet," he murmured, "but tomorrow it may rise again. Know this, Evelyn. No threat, no debt, no shadow of the past will ever reach you as long as I stand beside you, and I will always choose to stand. Evelyn's heart swelled with gratitude and something deeper, something stronger. Love that was neither fleeting nor conditional. I understand now, she said softly. Love is not just feeling, it's action. It's protection, it's trust, and it's choice, and you've shown me all of it. Taza's amber eyes softened. And you have shown me the courage to love, he replied. In your choice, in your trust, in the fire that burns in your heart. That is the price of forever, Evelyn. The willingness to give and receive without fear. And we have both paid it. The fire's glow reflected in their eyes, twin sparks of something enduring and fierce. The past had been conquered, debts settled, dangers faced, and in its place a life stretched before them, unbroken and unbound. They were no longer victims of circumstance but architects of their own fate. And in the quiet canyon night, Evelyn Carter understood fully. The price of forever was not measured in gold or fear, but in trust, courage, and the steadfast commitment of two hearts choosing each other, over and over for a lifetime. The canyon dawned in a quiet majesty, the sky painted in soft strokes of pink and gold. Evelyn Carter stood at the edge of the ridge, the wind tugging gently at her hair, carrying the scent of sage and wild horses. The events of the past days, the flight from danger, the whispered promises, the triumph over fear, and the settling of debts, had brought her here, to a place where freedom and choice intertwined. But this morning, the weight of her journey was palpable, not as a burden, but as the gravity of a heart learning to love and to be loved. Taza Redhawk approached silently, the strength and calm of his presence grounding her. He dismounted and stood beside her, their shoulders brushing lightly, a connection forged through trust, courage, and countless unspoken promises. For the first time, Evelyn felt the full depth of their bond, not just as protector and protected, but as two equals, choosing one another in a world that had often sought to deny them. I brought you here, Taza said softly, his amber eyes meeting hers. This is where I found peace, where I found myself, long before I found you. And now, his gaze softened, revealing the rare vulnerability beneath the stoic warrior. I choose to share it with you, forever. Evelyn turned to him, her eyes shimmering with tears and awe. I never thought I would feel safe, truly seen. But with you I am both. I've learned to trust, to fight, to face fear, and most of all to feel. And I choose you too, Taza. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but because I want to. Because I know that with you, I am whole. The wind carried a quiet hush over the canyon, as if the world itself had paused to honor their moment. Taza reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a touch that was both gentle and electrifying. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his thumb lingering against her cheek. Then tonight, as every night, you are mine only in choice, and I am yours. Not as possession, not as obligation, but as a promise, repeated, renewed, and unbroken. Evelyn felt a warmth surge through her chest, a fire that had begun as fear but had been transformed into courage, desire, and love. Her heartbeat echoed in the quiet canyon, a rhythm perfectly in sync with his own. She realized then that the trials, the threats, and the whispered promises had not merely tested them, they had forged them, tempered by danger and choice, into something enduring, something unshakable. Together, they moved toward the herd of wild horses grazing on the plateau, symbols of freedom and strength. Evelyn mounted her horse with ease now, confidence flowing through her every movement. Taza followed, guiding the herd with silent authority. Side by side they rode across the canyon, wind in their hair, the horizon stretching endlessly before them. A future unclaimed, unbound yet filled with promise. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the canyon in gold, Taza leaned close, his voice a low whisper only she could hear. You are mine, Evelyn, not by force but by choice. And I am yours, every day for all our days. Evelyn smiled, tears spilling freely, a mixture of joy, relief, and awe. And I will always choose you, she replied, her voice steady and sure. Forever, just as you choose me. In that moment, surrounded by the vastness of the canyon, the whisper of the wind, and the freedom of the wild horses, Evelyn Carter understood fully what it meant to be chosen and to choose in return. It was not about ownership or fear. It was about trust, courage, and the enduring power of the heart. And with the sun rising over the redstone cliffs, the two of them rode forward together, free, and bound by a love forged through trials, whispered promises, and the steadfast choice of two hearts claiming each other forever. The canyon echoed softly behind them, carrying their triumph, their devotion, and the promise that their hearts had made, chosen, fearless, and united for all time.